Hi, Robert. Mhm. Oh, I think you're muted.
I'm there now. Okay, thanks.
Oh, okay. Uh, we have
So,
about
sorry about
31 people on the call with us today.
that.
So exciting. So
I love
um,
technology.
yeah.
So anyway, let me just, I've got to share my screen with
Okay.
you.
Well, before you share your screen, I just have to introduce you and everything, and then we'll get you to share your screen. So okay. So now that we're all ready to get started, my name is Colleen Smith. I'm the head administrator of IHN for our online program. I've been with IHN 10 years. I take care of all new student registrations and any current things that students have. And then I also register people under their Con Ed courses. So today we have Robert here with us. He is going to be talking about how to analyze your iris in professional practice. So Robert is the co-founder of INHT, which is the Institute of Natural Health Technologies, and BIE, which is Bioenergetic Intolerance Elimination. He's studied quantum physics, herbology, traditional Chinese medicine, holistic nutrition, and iridology. He's done extensive studies in the science and practice of iridology, from Bernard Jensen to the Australian and European methods, which he'll share with you in his upcoming Con Ed course. So for all of you that are going to be staying for the entire webinar, we're going to do the webinar, which is a 1-hour webinar, followed by 50 minutes of Q&A at the end. So any questions, put them in the Q&A box, or there's a chat box, and we'll answer them at the end. And we also have a a giveaway that we're going to be doing as well. So the webinar is a 1-hour session with Rob, valued at $245. You can either do it in person or you can do it live. And maybe before Rob gets started, he can share if there's any, because I noticed we had some people on the call from Vancouver and not really local to Rob's clinic. So maybe he can share the virtual process of you submitting your iris photo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've actually done, somebody actually sent me one from Australia. So I was actually doing an iris analysis with somebody in Australia. So it works as long as I have a good photo. And I can give you some examples here. And if you're ever sitting in a photo, by the way, don't face the light, because all I get is glare.
Yeah. So for the webinar, we'll be doing that right at the end after the Q&A session. And you have to be still on the webinar to win the prize. So anyways, I will pass it over to Rob so he can tell you all about how to analyze your iris in professional practice.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm just going to bring up my share screen here, so bear with me. And you should see that now, correct? Does everybody see that? All right. Good. And Colleen, if you're not seeing this for some reason, because I can't get their feedback, I'm not hearing anybody, but please let me know if you can't see this.
Oh yeah, I can see it. So, and some of the panelists are saying they can see it. So I think you're good.
Thank you. So I'm really passionate about this. I've been doing iridology for, almost getting close to 30 years now. I'm passionate about it. I came across it by somebody, a couple of people saying, Rob, you got to go see this lady in such and such a place in Ontario. It was a very small town. And 2 people told me, you've got to see this lady. And I went to her and I was able to sit down with her, and she looks in my eyes and tells me, basically read my mail. She told me so much about myself. I wasn't expecting this. I just had a dairy problem and I wanted someone to help me with my dairy allergy. That's all it was. And she proceeded to tell me everything from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, my personality and everything. And I was completely blown away. Long story short, I was so impressed by it. I started studying and I became an iridologist, and I've been practicing. And here I am now showing you. But over the years, I've studied iridology concepts from different parts of the world. North American, which is the common one here in North America, it's Bernard Jensen iridology. Then there's something called European Constitutional Iridology. There is another form of iridology, and it's actually looking at the pupil, and it's from a Harry Wolff. And Harry Wolff, German iridologist, came up with a chart on the actual pupil. He called it pupil tonus. I will be doing a little bit of that tonight. And also, I have studied under Leonard Mulmer in California. He is one of the top sclerologists in the world. I've studied under him, but I'm going to be sharing a little bit of sclerology with you today. This is mostly iridology, but I do want to throw in sclerology. I think it's very, very important. And there is something else. It's called Rayid. It's actually the personalities, the interpretation of the personalities and relationships by the eyes. It was actually a study by the name of Danny Johnson. He worked with the Harvard Medical School, basically. He did studies over 20 years, actually took 20,000 people over a period of 20 years and did an analysis or basically took photos of their eyes and then had everyone fill out extensive questionnaires on their likes, their personalities, everything. And basically it was lined up under the computer, under the photos. So the photos basically were really good indication of a person's personality from that. And that's very exciting. It's not really considered iridology, but it is something that we consider throwing it in with iridology because it's so close to working with the eye. And a lot of people really like that. I'll use a lot of Rayid if I'm at a party situation or a social event or something, and people find out what I do, and the first thing I want to do is say, look in my eyes, tell me what you see. And after a while, I just say I'm in accounting or something. So they just leave me alone, but I'm not. But the fact is, I want to, when I do really want to get into it and have fun with people, I'll only talk about their personalities. Literally blows your hair back. It's extremely amazing how accurate it is. So I will probably touch on a little bit of that tonight. But I want to show you, and a lot of people here are watching from different parts of the world. I've even studied iridology methods from Dorothy Hall. She was an iridologist in Australia. I never actually studied under her directly, but I've read her books and her teachings and things like that. So I've studied methods from around the world, but never did I had a really tough time putting it all together. And the main type of iridology I did was called it was basically Bernard Jensen. Of those of you who are familiar with it, Bernard Jensen didn't discover iridology. He learned iridology back in the 1920s and was basically the person who headed it up in North America and really popularized it here. And he's got a few books out. So I'm going to be going through a little bit of that. And if you have only been trained with North American Bernard Jensen iridology, you may find this very, very, very useful. I've been doing that, and it's a phenomenal way of doing iridology, but it's slow and it's very cumbersome. And I'm going to show you a way to do a really comprehensive, full assessment on somebody using different methods of iridology from different parts of the world. So let's go on here. So the first thing you want to do, and then for the sake of time, I'm running a little bit behind. We had a few technical difficulties starting, but thank you for all of you who are joining us tonight. I'm going to show you what I do as an iridologist. And I've been teaching now for about 10 years with the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. And they basically contract me to do the class for them. And I've been loving it ever since. I'm passionate about this. But I want to show you some of and I've done a few of these webinars before, but if you want to know the real basics behind iridology, if you're looking at this for the very first time and you want to find out what's the background of iridology, how did it start? There's some other webinars of mine from the INHTs put on the YouTube. So if you look on YouTube, there's quite a few of them. And if you look at any one of them, it'll show you the background of iridology and how it started and everything. But I'm going to actually show you how to do an iris analysis. I don't know if there's too many videos like this out there, so I'm going to show you how I do it and and how it can affect, it can help you. I am teaching this at IHN. I have a course that's actually starting next month in February, and I think it goes to 16 weeks from February to June, from what I remember. And it's something that if you don't know what you do, it's actually a virtual. It's done online like this. And you wonder how effective it'll be if you're not actually there in class. But it's been very effective just doing it right online, because I'm actually showing you on your computer what I would normally put on a screen in the class. So it's basically doing the same thing, and we're talking live. So it's been very effective for the last few years. So one of the first things you want to look at is the constitutional strength. Point 1, find the constitutional strength. And that means, do you see how close these fibers are together? I'm going to blow this up a bit. Very, very, very tight fibers that make up the iris pattern. So for those of you who are already iridologists, you'll know this anyway. You look at the strength of the constitution. Why? Because it tells you how a person's going to, what program you can put a person on. If they've got a strong constitution, which the fibers are together, it means you're able to hold on to vitamins, minerals, and nutrients very well. You're able to resist sickness and disease quite well, and your potential longevity is very high. This person with a constitution like this could easily live over 100 years of age. Now, I don't know the future. I can't tell the future. I'm not a fortune teller or a prophet. I'm just basically looking at a person's constitutional strength and saying you have that ability to live a long period of time. Now, going to the next one is it's a weak constitution. We just say it's a weak constitution, strong constitution, medium, whatever. This is kind of medium to weak constitution. And you can see the difference here with the fibrous dispersions. It's much looser fiber. In other words, I always tell people, what would hold water better? My hand cupped like this or like this? Obviously that. So these ones with the looser fibers, they don't tend to hold the nutrients as much. So this person would need to be taking a lot of minerals through their whole life to keep their body healthy. And if you look at this and you say, well, this is a weak constitution, they tend not to live as long as strong constitutional people. However, a weak constitution can live as long as a strong constitutional person, a strong constitution, but they have to really baby themselves. They have to really look after it, take lots of nutrients and good mineral supply in their body, and they can live a long, long time, just as long as a strong constitution. So you can see the different levels of fiber. These white ones, wherever you see white in the eye, is inflammation. So there's 4 layers or levels of disease in an eye. They call it acute, which is the inflammation where the fibers stick up here. You can see that. It usually shows as white. It's raised fibers. And then when a problem starts, there's actually 4 layers to the iris. I'll do it this way. There's 4 layers to the iris. And when the problem starts, it swells up, and that's the acute stage. And then if you continue to irritate that area or it keeps getting assaulted, what happens is, I'll turn it this way, the first layer opens up like that. It splits open. So that'd be like this one here. It's called a subacute disease. It went from inflammation to subacute, and then when it gets worse, if it hasn't been dealt with, the next layer splits open, and then you get something called chronic, and what we're looking at here. And then there's one more stage, 1 split, 2 split, then the third one splits, and the light doesn't even get down inside it. It's so deep, and you can see it here. Those little black specks, those little areas right there, that's called degenerative disease, when you see them black like that. So those are the 4 areas that you're looking at. Now I can actually show you a cross section of the iris, and you can see over here, you get the raised fiber, which means acute. Then when it drops down, it goes into the subacute, and then the chronic and degenerative. Once it's to the degenerative stage, it can't come back. You can't re-educate that tissue back into health. Once it's gone, it's gone. And we don't see death of a whole kidney or something or whatever. You see this big black hole in the lung. It's usually some small tissue that's dead, or it's not coming back. You can't re-educate it back to life. All right. So the next thing you want to look at, besides the strengths of the Constitution, you want to look at the Iris toxins. And so there are different toxins in the body. There's different theories in this with different North American, different European Constitution iridologists. So I'm going to just talk about from what I've learned from different places in the world. The toxins in the body show up, they're clear or they're colorless. What causes them to change color is the different emotions we go through. When we experience different emotions, there's a part of the brain called the hypothalamus that releases these chemicals called neuropeptides. And when they mix with the toxins, they change the color of that toxin. And so we can basically tell by the color of the toxins what emotion a person's been going through. So if you look here, we've already seen the white, but I also see yellow in here too. See the yellow color? And then there's orange, and then you get red, brown, and brown. So what do they all mean? The white toxin we looked at earlier means that's more of acute inflammation. And I'm going to go through this in a minute, what it actually means. And then, but then that same inflammation starts to affect the kidneys. If I see yellow in an eye, I know that's because a person's been going through fear, anxiety, worry. That neuropeptide's released, mixes with the toxin, turns it yellow. Then there's a different emotion that's released that turns this toxin orange and red, brown, etc. So let's look at that chart right now. So here's the color chart that we use. And so in the first section here, you're going to see the physiological, what part of the body is affected when we see a certain color. And then there's the psychological, what's the emotion going on there? So the first ones we looked at, and one eye picture we showed you there, showed a lot of white. That means there's a kidney imbalance. It's raised fibers, means irritation, pain, hyperactivity. It's basically acute disease. That's the acute stage of disease when it's white and inflamed. But the emotion that's behind that, and you can take this to the bank. I have been doing this for so many years. Whenever I see a lot of white in an eye, I know that's a person that's been hardened from life. You see, they're not really necessarily a bitter person. They've just been hardened. They've been going through so much in their life, so many hardships. They've learned to harden a bit. They can be a little bit over rational with different opinions and etc. And if the white is on the liver or the spleen area in the eye, and I'm going to show you an iris chart in a minute, then we know that there's more anger. But it's more, it basically shows different things. If there's white tissue on the spleen area, that's a person that tends to save the whales and fight for the children. It's more righteous anger kind of thing. Whereas if the white is on the liver zone, that means a person just is bad tempered. Don't get on their bad side. Don't irritate them. They'll explode usually. So a lot of white in the eye also indicates unforgiveness issues. If people have had things that have hurt them or whatever, and they haven't resolved that hurt or whatever, they can get unforgiveness issues, and you'll see a lot of white from that. When we see yellow in an eye, again, the neuropeptides are released from the hypothalamus, mixes with the toxins, and there's a chemical reaction there that changes the actual color of the toxin. It's like a chemical compound. You put them together and two colors mix. We used to do this in science. We had to take two test tubes of clear liquid and we dump them in a beaker and it goes red or blue as soon as they mix. Basically, same thing's happening here. As soon as that neuropeptide that's released when somebody is, let's say, having a lot of fear or anxiety, worry, concerns, once it mixes with a toxin, it turns it yellow. And that same neuropeptide, this is what we postulate that same neuropeptide starts to affect the adrenals. Okay. Now, a bright orange color, it's a recent grieving period that somebody has gone through, usually in the last year and a half to 3 years, or a year and a half to 2 years, let's say. And that usually indicates a pancreas imbalance. A dark orange toxin, that represents long-standing lack of joy or frustration. So when somebody, you don't necessarily, there's a difference between happiness and joy. Happy, I'm content. I'm happy. I call myself happy because I'm just content. If you have true joy, you can stand on the top of the roof and scream, "I love life!" Woo! That's true joy. I mean, it's just radiating. It's like a fountain coming up from you. You're full of joy. So there's a difference between joy and happiness. If you lack that joy in your life, you'll see a lot of orange in your eye. Now, what's actually being stained on the actual eye is the actual toxins that are there. If you don't have a lot of toxins, you won't see a lot of coloration. But if you do have toxins there, they will be stained, and you can tell by the color of it what emotion you've been through. If I see a reddish brown color, that is usually an indication that person's been going through irritability, depression, resentment issues. And it also, that same neuropeptide affects the spleen, the same neuropeptide that affect from the long-standing lack of joy and frustration affects the pancreas. See, so different organs are affected. The last color we look at is the light brown or dark brown, and that always represents anger. And if you see anger, you don't see anger, you see a brown color in the eye. And if you see that brown, this doesn't mean a brown eye. This means toxins over top of a brown eye, which I'll show you in a minute. That means this person has been going through anger. It doesn't mean they are currently angry, but that once it's stained, it stays stained. Okay, now, so let's go back to that chart again. You can see the different colors here. You see? So you've got the red, brown, you've got brown here, we've got the dark orange. So there's different emotions you can tell by looking at a person. Now, when I look at this orange and I see yellow or orange or brown, I know they have some blood sugar issue. So it's important to look at the colors and keep them in the back of your mind or write them down, because we're going to address that later. Anyone that you see that has some orange or yellow or some brown toxin, not a brown eye, but brown toxins you see here, we know that they have blood sugar issues. Why? Remember I said the yellow, it affects the adrenals. Adrenals help to balance blood sugar. They work between the pancreas and the liver, trying to balance the blood sugar levels. If I see orange in the eye, it represents pancreas. Well, the pancreas, you definitely know that it affects the blood sugar. It's releasing insulin when you need it to get the sugar in the cell. And the other one is the brown color here, and you know that affects the liver. And if the liver is affected, the liver releases glucose when you need it. The pancreas releases insulin to get it down. So it's going back and forth, and the adrenal glands are trying to balance between the two. So anytime you see yellow or orange or brown toxin in an eye, we know they're going to have some blood sugar issues. All right. Now, the next thing I do as an iridologist, and this makes it really easy. If you've never studied European iridology before, and you are a typical North American Bernard Jensen iridologist, you may really want to look into European constitutions. I teach this thoroughly through the training. And so we have one here. It's called, now there's 10 that the real common ones they talk about don't include this one down here called the neurolymphatic. They're basically the neurogenic, polyglandular, connective tissue, lipemic diathesis or fat potential, basically what that means, biliary, anxiety tetanic, hematogenic, uric acid diathesis, hydrogenoid, and kidney lymphatic. Those are the 10. So I added an 11th one here because I think this was very, very important. I didn't discover this. Other iridologists use neurolymphatic as a constitution when talking about European constitutions. Now, I have a chart here. You can see it here. It's the same chart. And on the back has everything about that constitution. So if I say someone has a polyglandular, I know that they're going to struggle with endocrine system imbalance. They're going to have gastrointestinal issues, and they're going to have some blood sugar metabolism errors. If I have a person who is a biliary, all this orange, then I know a person's going to have a problem with blood sugar. They're going to have a problem with gastrointestinal issues, some hormonal imbalances. If they have a problem, let's say the uric acid diathesis over here, let's say, they have a lot of inflammation in their body, and it causes things like gout, gouty arthritis, anything, itis, tendinitis, bursitis, whatever. They have a very hard time eliminating the toxins from their body. I will get into that later when I start going through this. So let's move on. And then next, I want to look at the pupil size. There's actually a chart here. You're going to have to trust me. I won't be able to read through this whole thing for the sake of time, but it actually shows you the shapes of the pupils. Sometimes there's a whole complete misformation of the actual pupil, and that means something. Sometimes it's only a flattened edge of it, and that means something else. So I'm going to go through some of that with them. I don't do it every time I do an iris analysis, but most times I do. Sclerology is something I will touch on tonight. Sclerology can take years to learn sclerology very well, but you can actually learn it in about 9 weeks, 5 or even 8 weeks. You can learn sclerology, and but it just takes time to practice and work through it. So I'll go through that a little bit. Here is a pupil chart. It's a pupil tonus chart that I put together here, but it talks about the size of the pupil and where it talks about the collarette or the autonomic nerve wreath, the distance between the two. So you can see it. There's a very large pupil and a large rough. That's what they call this distance between the pupil and the actual collarette. And so I'll go through this with you. I don't need to get into the whole explanation of it right now. Then I put together a chart years ago because a lot of students were coming up to me and saying, I just don't know what to look at. I'm so confused. I don't know what to look at first. So if you could help me out here, I don't know where to start. There's just so much going on. So if there's something you can do to make it easier. And so back 20 years ago, I put this chart together, and I've taken charts from Bernard Jensen. I did Harry Wolf's charts. I've done different charts from different top iridologists around the world. And I kind of put them together in this one chart to make it easier to read. And then you actually start looking at what order do I look at? I don't care how complicated an eye looks. It's still really simple to do a complete iris analysis if you follow the steps. And if you follow the steps, it makes it very, very easy. As you can see, the yellow zone is the stomach. It represents digestion. Then the orange zone, you can see here the small intestine, but also this area right here. It's called the assimilation ring. And that's very important to know. I'll go through that. Then I'll go through that when I'm going through the analysis with you. Then the next zones are the green zones. We look at the colon. Okay, and it continues over here, the transverse descending colon, sigmoid, rectum, and the anus. So we look at the colon, the kidneys, left and right, as you're noticing. This is their left and their right, not your left and right, because you're looking at the person this way. Then you've got the skin. That's right here on the outside of the eye. And this is represents the respiratory, bronchioles, bronchus, bronchioles in the left lung, okay? And then the next thing you want to look at is the circulatory lymphatic system. That's this red zone here, okay? The lymph nodes show up here at the same time, the lymphatic system as well as the circulatory system. And then you can see the heart. And you'll see that the heart is more on one side than it is the other, because the heart's in the center of the chest, but a little bit to the left. That's why you see more of it on the left side and less of it on the right side. Okay. And then after that, you want to look at the nerve system, the nerves. That's not listed here, but you want to look at the nerves next. So the first thing you want to look at is this jagged line. This is called the collarette. The North American iridologists refer to this as the autonomic nerve wreath. But the new terminology that they're using worldwide, they're trying to use the same terminology around the world from different iridologists around the world. They're trying to say, this is what we should use as the proper, because some say collarette, some say autonomic nerve wreath. So they're saying they've settled on collarette. I'll be using the new terminations. So terminologies. So if you are a iridologist from North America and you studied Bernard Jensen, forgive me for not calling it the North American way. And then finally, then you look at the lacuna. The lacuna are the separation fibers, the areas of weakness in the body. A layman iridologist, a new iridologist, will start with a lacuna first. They look at this split in the fiber and this one and this one, and they go through. Now, when I was a new iridologist, I would take about 3 to 4 hours to do an analysis on someone's eye. People don't always have 3 to 4 hours to sit in front of you. So we learn to just, we just try to do the best we can. The fastest way we're going to do it is using a system like this, but also using the Constitutional Iridology. So I'm going to show you how much easier it is to do it in this fashion. All right, so let's look at our first slide here. Well, first off, we want to look at the color or the constitution type. What's the constitution type? Well, you don't want to look at see, there's the collarette there, okay? See this jagged line? That's the one I was telling you about. It separates the parasympathetic nervous system in here from the sympathetic nervous system out here. The collarette also, basically on the inside of the collarette, this is called the pupillary zone, and on the outside is called the ciliary zone. All right, now, as you can see, the pupillary zone, which represents the gastrointestinal, it's weak. That's why the fibers are so dispersed in this area. They're very wide fibers, making it look very, very dark. But on the outside, in the ciliary zone, the fibers are quite nice. So if you want to look at the constitution, you look at the fibers on the outside of the collarette in the ciliary zone out here. So not bad. It's a pretty good area. There's certain areas where there's a little bit of weakness, but for overall, the majority of the iris is quite strong. So I would probably say that's about a medium strong constitution here. The next thing you want to look at is the colors. What colors do you see? I really don't see much of any other color other than that of just white. A lot of white inflammation. That represents inflammation, pain, irritation, things like that. Next thing I would do is the European constitution type. Now, if I was doing North American iridology, Bernard Jensen, I would look at this, and I would go around a clock because there's a section of an eye, and we refer to it as a clock. Europeans refer to it as a percentage, 5%, 10%, 15% of the circle, 20%. But in North America, we'd say 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So it's like a clock. And so they would just go around and look at all the different. And that's not bad. There's not many things going on here with this person. But some people, some eyes you look at, they're just overwhelming with the amount of lacuna. That's the splits in the fiber. Wow, I don't know where to start. So if we do European iridology, I would say this is, and you're going to have to, I won't be able to hold this up each time. So you're just going to have to say, you're going to have to trust me on this. This is this one here. It's the uric acid diathesis, or uric acid potential. There's a lot of uric acid built up in their body. This is what all the white is. A lot of inflammation, pain, irritation. That's a person with, some kidney issues, usually because the kidneys try to filter out all that acid from the body. So usually kidneys an issue here. But they get arthritic conditions, gouty arthritis, tendonitis, bursitis, things like that. So it's very, very common with this type of person. And the other thing that I would probably go to is because they've got flower petals around here, there's constitution types. There's 11 of them, but I'm going to say these two. You're very rarely just one. There's combination of constitution types. So this is a uric acid diathesis polyglandular constitution. What does that mean? Well, uric acid, I talked about the inflammation. What's the polyglandular? Polyglandular deals with endocrine system weakness or imbalance. It usually means, what's your endocrine? Your glands, like your thyroid, your pituitary, your adrenals, your gonads, things like that. So these are all different things that can be thrown off in a person. We can see right here, there's a thyroid issue here, adrenals here and here. This is probably more the leg here, but adrenals are more seen on this side here. So they're going to say, we know we have to work on their they're going to have to work on their whole endocrine system, build it up a little bit. Okay, but the number one thing that I'd say here with this person is I'd say they need to start working on getting their body more alkaline. Their body is very, 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 very acidic. And that's what shows. It's a beautiful icy blue eye, but icy blue eye means there's a lot of inflammation in a person's body. And they usually are intolerant to wheat and dairy products. Very, very common with these blue-eyed people like this. All right. So the next thing I want to look at is I'm going to look at the pupil tonus here. And the pupil tonus will be the shape of the pupil. These ones happen to be, they're not round, they're more oval, up and down like that. And this one is known as a frontal diverging ellipse, or actually just a vertical ellipse. In a vertical ellipse, they got a lot of anxiety states, a lot of nervous anxiety, some weeping spells. Muscle spasms are very common. Why? Because the acid that's accumulating in their tissue are pushing out the oxygen out of their cells. So when that happens, they start getting muscle cramps. So it's very common with this person. And anyway, there's also there's a tendency to develop cerebral hemorrhages. And I don't want to scare you with that, but those people can have a cerebral, a brain bleed and a stroke. And I'm going to show you here, we're starting to get a little bit of congestion up in here. See how it's getting fuzzy looking up here? It's not a clean edge. You can see there's a line there. It's a fairly clean edge you can see. But when you get up into the head area, it gets very fuzzy. That means they're not getting enough circulation to the head area. It's getting a little toxic. And you can see down here kind of murky looking, yellowy, foggy, hazy. That's the circulatory zone. That's that red zone I told you. And that indicates the person is probably having some hardening of the arteries. They're starting to harden. I've seen much worse cases, which I'll show you in a minute, but this is, it means they're basically starting to get that way. They're starting to get the hardening of the arteries. Now, when I look at that, I can say, well, I'm going to show you another one before I get into that. I don't want to confuse you too much, but they are going to have to start working on their arteries, trying to clean them out a little bit. And I believe there's a little bit of calcium and cholesterol that's building up with this person. Sometimes it's just one or the other, and sometimes it's both. This person would probably have to work on both. And as far as the pupil, it's called, I don't normally do this unless you've got I want to go back to my iridology chart here. Now, an iris about that size, you can see the size of the pupil when the light is shining in on it. It should be fairly small like that. Not really, really large, but here in this picture, you can see these pupils are a lot larger. And so when I see an abnormally small pupil or a large one, that's when I use this part of pupil tonus, and we look at the difference between the pupil and the collarette. And it's a large pupil, but yet the collarette is way out here. So it's called a large pupil, large rough. And this is the type of person who they eat large amounts of food. They're usually quite hungry all the time. They absorb their food well, but their utilization is poor. So they can absorb, they break down the food, but they don't utilize it very well. So their body's lacking the nutrients they need. So their elimination is poor despite high energy levels. This person has lots of energy, and they're typically overachievers. This person with a large pupil, large rough, overachievers, and they usually are quite extroverted people. The further the distance out from the pupil to the iris, or the rough, or the collarette, so the pupil to the collarette, when there's a big space or big gap in there, they're usually very extroverted. If there's a very, very small space between the pupil and this collarette, let's say this pulled way into here, that would be an introvert. So the further out that collarette goes from the pupil, the more extroverted they are. The closer it is into the pupil, the more introverted a person is. That's Harvard Medical School study with Denny Johnson. So here's another illustration, patient with a lot of inflammation in their body. So Yes, lots of white tissues, and you see some orange in here too. So let's blow this up. It's very important to see the orange. There's a little bit of orange here, little fleck of it here and here and here. So there is some orange color in there. I don't see any other colors. There's some orange over here. So I know that there's going to be some blood sugar issues because I'm seeing orange, okay? But a lot of the white, like that last person, a lot of these people these days have a lot of inflammation. And so I would say this again is a uric acid diathesis, a lot of uric acid, biliary constitution. Uric acid diathesis, biliary constitution. And I would actually add a third one in here, and I'd say lipemic diathesis. So it's a uric acid diathesis, biliary, lipemic diathesis, lipids, lots of fat. And you can see some here on the sclera. This is called a pinguicula. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at this closely. When I told you this person has some orange and there's going to be some blood sugar issues because that's pancreas, that represents pancreas, it works with the blood sugar. I want you to see this ring. And I'm going to tell you about this in a minute. But anytime we see this orange or reddy orange or reddy brown ring here, it's called the assimilation ring. When you see that, that's indicative of a person whose liver doesn't produce enough lecithin. Lecithin is very similar to dish soap. Dish soap meaning, you try to wash a greasy frying pan without soap and water. You just run water over it. It's just going to bead and run off. Or just take a scrub pad to it when it's dry and just going to move the fat around. You're not going to clean it off. You need water and soap. The soap emulsifies the fat, lifts it off, and the water washes it away. Well, this is typically what the liver uses. It uses lecithin to break down fats. Okay, well, we can see they're deficient in lecithin, but then look at here. This, usually when you see fat on the sclera, that's indicative of a fatty liver. So whenever you look at this and you see fatty liver, I've worked with a lot of people. I'm not allowed to diagnose. That's for the doctor's job to do. But my job is to say, this is usually very common with a person with fatty liver. And they'll usually say, yeah, I've got to check up. And they told me I have a fatty liver. And you can see it over here too. There's more on this side. And this is typically, here's something else too. I want you to see in the sclera. See the little squiggles here? When you see a little squiggle like that, that's usually an indication that the person's blood pressure tends to fluctuate, tends to go up and down. High blood pressure, low blood pressure, whatever. So we can see there's stuff going on with the cardiovascular system here. So gastrointestinal, that's when we start getting into this iris chart here, which I told you there. Okay. So when we start looking at that chart there, we look at the digestion. How is the digestion? Well, if you look at this ring here, let's blow it up. This ring tells me they've got a hypoacidic stomach. Why is it hypo as opposed to hyper? Some people say, no, it's a hyperactive stomach. No. If this stomach ring, this zone right in here, is darker than the tissue in the ciliary zone, then that means that's a hypoacidic stomach. If the ring here was brighter white than the tissue in the ciliary zone, then we'd say it's a hyperacidic, but it's not. That tissue is not as dark, or is not as bright, as the tissue out here. So we say that's a hypoacidic. It's an underacid stomach. They're going to get a lot of gas and bloating and things like that. Very common. So the stomach's affected. The digestion is affected. The eliminations, assimilation's affected. Let's try this again. So the digestion's affected. The assimilation is affected here too. And also looking at the colon. Well, the colon, if you follow this collarette, the colon line's right up inside that. So it's way out here, a really extroverted person right here. See this? Really expanded colon. And so that's a very, very, it's a sort of a large pupil, large rough, like we read the last one as well. So overall, we can tell this person needs to work on a lot of inflammation in their body. They need to work on their blood sugar because the sugar goes in the body and it's floating around there. Then the pancreas releases the insulin, it grabs it, and then it converts that sugar into fat. It actually changes into fat. And then it tries to get in the receptor site. If the body is slightly resistant to sugar, which you're showing the orange here, it's not fitting in the receptor site. It should just go from the bloodstream right into the receptor site. But it still can get in there, but it requires the pancreas releasing more insulin to say, get in there and give it a shove. But the pancreas is overproducing insulin at this point. And what that does is it keeps converting the sugar in the body into fat. And that the liver is going, wow, the fat's building up in the bloodstream. What are we going to do here? I can't break it down fast enough because I don't have enough lecithin. Remember that brown ring? So what do? I'm going to have to store it. So the liver starts producing cholesterol to bind to the fat and then to store that. And so what happens is you start getting a fatty liver. It starts building up in the arteries here. So when I look at the sclera and I see a pinguicula, which is a fatty deposit, and I see this white opaque ring around here in the circulatory zone, I know that person has, and from my own experience, they have high cholesterol. I'm not allowed to diagnose that as an iridologist, but in my experience working with so many people for so many years, whenever I've seen this ring here and I see the fat in the sclera, then I know they have high cholesterol. All right, so let's go on to another one here. Now, I want to show you this for your iridologists, who are your typical North American iridologists. You're going, oh my gosh, look at this thing. Look at how many splits and holes there are. Now, if you're trained like a North American iridologist, you're going to go around the clock. You can look at, oh, there's a split here, and there's a lacuna here. There's a lacuna. That's what the splits are called, lacuna, and lacunae for plural. Oh, there's one here, here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here. By the time you get through this person, both eyes, they're going to be crawling out of your office in depression with their head hung low. I mean, if a person has a weak constitution, which this one is, the constitution is weak, very weak. So they're not able to hold on to vitamins, nutrients, and minerals as well. What I've learned from iridology is you do not want to get into looking at all the lacunae with a weak constitution. This is where a lot of layman iridologists come along and they get so confused and go, geez, I don't know if I can do this. It's just so much to look at. I could spend 3 hours with this person. No, don't do that. It's the best thing to do with a weak constitution is to pull in your European constitution type. And that is this one here, right there. It's right there. That is your connective tissue constitution. Connective tissue right there. I don't know if you can see that. Connective tissue means they're easily sprained tissue. They have prolapses on tissue. They tend to sprain, pull muscles, pull ligaments, tendons and things like that. Injury easy, getting sprains and injuries like that very easily. They don't tend to hold on to nutrients well. They don't have much energy reserves, so they stand on one foot. And when they get tired, they lean on the other foot, and then they move back and forth. They have to sit down a lot. They don't have a lot of energy like a strong person or a person with a strong constitution. So this person needs a lot of minerals in their life. And so what I would suggest with this one is to start off with European constitution type. So this is a connective tissue constitution plus biliary. See the orange color? That means they've got biliary. Plus they have these dots around here. See there's little fluctuations. They're little lymphatic tophi. They're little lymph nodes. That represents congested lymph nodes around the body. It's the same zone as the circulatory zone. But whenever you sell those are the people that they get swollen glands. Whenever time something goes around, they get it. Now, it's very indicative of a person who suffers with ear, nose, and throat problems. These are the people that have problems with dust and pollens and molds and things like that. So that happens quite easily with these people. They usually have to blow their nose first thing in the morning because they get a lot of sinus congestion. The other thing that I would suggest with this, so I've got the connective tissue first constitution. The second one is biliary. The third one would be the hydrogenoid. That is a person who is very prone to, or just read it here. So the hydrogenoid person, lymphatic congestion of the body, it's hyperplasia of white blood cells. They're shown as allergies. Proteins are hard to break down. This person is usually a chilly type of person. They usually have a problem with low iron. And you can see out here in the sclera, do you see this blue hue out here? That blue hue is called a lunula. Whenever you see this blue hue out there, you know they're typically low on iron, and that makes them a chilly type of person. And the other constitution I'll use is this one. It's called neurolymphatic. That's the 11th one that I use. And it represents a collarette that's brightened and whitened like that. See how bright and white it is? That means it's inflamed. This is a person with lots of anxiety conditions, anxiety, nervous disorders. They get stressed very easily. They tend to make mountains out of molehills. So that's this type of person. They need a lot of B vitamins and magnesium and things like that to keep them calm. So that's this person. It's a much easier way to do a European Constitution. Now you think I've memorized this because I've been doing it for so many years, but as a new iridologist or someone practicing the first time, you can just look over the back and it tells you exactly what's going on with this person. And they'll agree with everything you just said. The European Constitutions is very quick, and I didn't have to go through and name every single lacuna here. Now, the last thing you do when you're doing European Constitution type, if you want, you can go back and look at all the different zones, like I was mentioning here on my chart. Rather than flipping back, I'll show you this way. You can do the stomach zone. You can look at that, and you can look at the assimilation and the elimination channels and the circulatory, right, and the heart. And you can also look at the nervous system. Well, the nervous system we've already talked about, and that is the collarettes, very white and inflamed. So there is a way as to wrap up and basically tell you what I was looking at. What I look at as an iridologist when I practice different methods. I start off with just basically, I look at the colors, or the constitution type, I should say. Look at the constitution type. Is a strong constitution? Is a weak? The weak one's going to need more time to recuperate, where strong constitutions bounce back really easy. They absorb vitamins, nutrients really quickly, so you don't need to take as much as a person with a weak constitution. Then they look at the colors. Do they have yellow, orange, or brown? You know they're going to have some blood sugar issues. Then I do the constitution, the European constitutions. Then I do the pupil tonus. Again, we're seeing a large pupil with a large ruff. So we've seen that in 3 different people now. It's a fluke that I've just picked out 3 people with the same constitution with their pupil size and the ruff size. And then lastly, I'll look at sclera. I will look at sclera for certain things. I don't really get into a lot of it. There's inflammation. This is the heart zone, the arterial heart zone. And you can see there's a lot of like a pinky color to it from fine webbing. That just typically means there's a lot of inflammation in a person's body. This one here is basically pointing to the lungs, saying there's a little bit of irritation or stress on the lungs that needs to be worked on, respiratory system. A little bit in the liver. So I don't really have to get into the sclerology that much until something's pretty evident, it stands out. Some people love to work a lot with sclerology, and I do, but not in every time I do an analysis. I will cover it somewhat, but don't do a lot of sclerology like a sclerologist would do. Okay. Large pupil, small ruff. And a large pupil, small ruff, basically, actually, I'm just going to show you on I've got a sclera chart I want to show you. So a large pupil, small ruff is this one here. It's a very large pupil and a small gap here. That's called a ruff. So this is a person, typically poor absorption of food and air, resulting in no reserves of nutrients and vital energies and brain power. It's very low. So they're tired all the time. They're exhausted. And North American iridologists will look at this and they see large pupil. That means adrenal exhaustion. Well, that kind of sounds like the same symptoms I just mentioned here. The energy available is from a faulty metabolism, and it's dispersed quickly, but results in chronic fatigue, low basal metabolic rate, inability to exercise, and low self-esteem. Actually, when you have a large pupil in a small rough like that, it is indicative of a low self-esteem in this person. So you can see a European constitution that's in biliary, uric acid diathesis, and a lipemic diathesis. That's this one here. Or not lipemic diathesis, pardon me. Neurolymphatic. That's that inflamed rough here. So that's what I would say with that. It's a much easier way to do it. And we can cover the European or the North American as well. It would be going around. I wouldn't have time on this webinar to do it, but I basically cover that when I'm doing an iris analysis. I will go around the different zones as well, but once I've done the European constitution type, this has made my iridology over the years. I've done it for, like I said, a long time. And I find the fastest way to do an iris analysis to do European, but I follow up with the North American too, and I'll go around and check the different zones that I mentioned on that chart. Right here, we have a biliary, anxiety, tetanic, kidney, lymphatic constitution. Again, that's on the chart. I don't have time to go through it with you. It tells me they've got blood sugar issues, gastrointestinal. They've got some hormonal imbalances. They've got a lot of uric acid buildup. Some kidney, there's some inflammation, some issues with kidney, and also neuromuscular tension. When I see these rings, and they're not really deep, they're shallow rings, that means they've got a potassium deficiency. When they're really, really deep etched rings, let's see if I can find one here. There's a deeper one here, here, and here. That's more of a magnesium deficiency. So you can tell a lot. Now, looking at the sclera, you see these brown spots. That's called melanin. It means they have some bacteria in their liver. And it means the hardening of the liver when you start seeing that. On this side, you see a vertical line. This is one you have to be careful with. A very thin vertical line here is indicative of a person who has heart problems in the family. They have heart attack in the family. When you see a vertical on the left side, it means there is the history of heart attack in the family. Doesn't mean this person's going to have a heart attack. When I look at I'll go back to one here. When I see the vertical in the right side, that means there's a history of stroke in the family. Again, it doesn't mean they're going to have it. But if it was a big, fat, angry red line on either side, then I'd say you need to get into your doctor right away and get this checked, get your cardiovascular system corrected. I have actually sent people to the hospital. I said, get to your doctor right away. You're going to have a heart attack. And he says, okay. 3 weeks later, he comes back for another appointment. I said, what did the doctor say? Did you go to the doctor? He says, no. And his wife sitting beside him says, he's such a procrastinator. He doesn't do it. He says, tell me something. I used to be right. I'd walk about 50, 60 feet, and then my teeth would ache and my jaw would ache. And then it goes away when I stop and I start walking again, my teeth would ache again. It's really weird. But now I find when I wake up in the morning, my teeth and jaw ache. And I said, you've got to get to the doctor right away. I closed the computer. I said, out of my office. And I've never had to do this before, but I had to do it to this person once. And I said, you need to see a doctor right away. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor laughed at him. I said, that's ridiculous. I can't believe you went to an iridologist and they told you all this. And he says, well, he was right about every single thing that he mentioned about my body, my personality, everything. Why would he be right about this? I want to see a cardiologist. Like, I just checked your heart's fine. He says, I need to see a cardiologist. He said, look, you're going to get a cardiologist appointment maybe in 6 months. Okay, I'll refer you to a cardiologist. He says, I don't have 6 months. Rob says, I could literally have a heart attack any day now. So the guy says, the only way you're going to see a cardiologist is if you go to a hospital. He says, thank you. So he goes and he says, my doctor says I'm going to have a heart attack. Now, I didn't tell him to say that. And he didn't say my medical doctor. I was given doctor of natural medicine a long time ago. I don't even use that title anymore. But he says my doctor. And even though I didn't tell him to say that, so they assumed they probably meant medical doctor. So they took his blood pressure right away, and her face went white and says, we've got to get you on a test right away. So they put him on the treadmill and is going to run a little bit to test his heart. And the nurse said, turn it off. You kill him. He says, what? He says, I don't know. Your heart's jumping all over the place. We don't know what's going on. So we're going to have to do an MRI. They took him down to the hall, put him under this thing. And when he came out of the MRI, the cardiologist's face was white. And he says, I don't know how to tell you this. You're literally about to have a massive heart attack. Your right vessel in your heart's about 90% clogged, and your left one's 85% clogged. I don't know how you're still walking, but you're literally hours away from having a massive heart attack. So we have to do an open heart surgery this afternoon. Here's the pen, hold it, I'll move the paper. We're going to sign this, get you in there right away. He had just enough time to call his family and say, I'm going under the knife. And he came to, he's hugging them all, and he's saying, he's crying. He's, I'm so glad to be alive. And he now calls me Uncle Rob because he says I saved his life. I didn't save your life. The cardiologist saved your life. I just alerted you to it. And that's the beautiful part about iridology. We can work with the doctors. They have to do they're the actual ones that do the diagnosing. We just say, there's an area here I want you to look at. And that's what I saw with this person. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to, I just want to share this one here too. One quick one. This is what's called a hematogenic eye. It's a true brown eye, a little harder to see. So some of you are wondering with brown eyes, why don't you see brown eyes? How come you don't show any brown eyes? Well, I'm showing them to you now, but they're harder to see. See, when I blow this up, you can see the lacuna, the fibrous separation in here in the lungs, the neck and shoulder area, the lungs, the cardiovascular area. But it's really hard when you're doing an analysis on a dark brown or almost a black iris like this. So I love to use the European. So I would say this is a hematogenic constitution, meaning true brown. They tend to hold a lot of acidity, but they have a hard time dumping toxins from the colon and the liver. And so this is a true hematogenic eye. It's pure brown through the whole eye. And there's another constitution too. You see this white ring around here? This is very common with hematogenic constitutions. They tend to have this opaque, the corneal opacity up here. And this is what's known as hardening of the arteries. Again, we don't want to diagnose that, but you see that, and I want you to get this checked out, get your arteries checked out. Now, I don't see fat buildup in the sclera. Well, I mean, the pinguicula, blobs of fat, but I do see this. So if I don't see anything in the sclera, and then I see this white ring, I assume that's a calcium metabolism error in their body. Their body's not able to metabolize calcium properly. Now, if I saw the fat buildup and this ring, then I'd say it's probably a cholesterol. Most likely it is a cholesterol problem. But again, if I see the white ring without the pinguicula, without the fat, then it is a calcium metabolism. Now, notice the pupils. They're a little bit inward. They're not in the center. That also tells you something too. So inward pupils, that gives them kind of a cross-eyed appearance. Even though they're looking straight ahead, it's a cross-eyed appearance. It indicates digestive weakness, cardiac weakness, and lung weakness. So that's what we get by looking at this, just by doing the pupil tonus and the European constitution type. I can tell them so much about themselves. And I can see there's melanin here, right here. See that? It's this little bruise right there. When I start seeing little bruises like this at the end of veins or whatever, that means a sugar metabolism imbalance. They're not metabolizing sugar properly. So I also know they're going to have some issues with blood sugar as well. And see, there's a history of stroke in the family. See that? And this also represents their immune system is down in this area. It's called immune system tangent that goes into a vertical. And over here, we've got a couple of vertical lines here, which tells me there's a history of heart attack in their family too. So if I look in their heart, I can see there's a lacuna here. See that? Right there. It's closed, which means inherited. And so I would be telling this person to get into a doctor right away. All right. So for the sake of time, I just want to talk about this as something you can do too. You can look up, it's called There's a book called What the Eye Reveals. It's Rayid Iris Interpretation. We do cover this in the course, and we talk about different personalities, who you're closer to, mother or father, who you're more like, what issues you may have with mother or dad, father. What side of the bed do you like to sleep on? What are your eating habits? What are, who you're best suited for personality-wise? This is where the ladies love it, because you can actually talk about, oh, this would be the best partner for me, or the guys would say this would be the best partner for me, and whatever. It's a great fun part of it, and a lot of the ladies, more than men, love this part of it. But it's about personalities and relationships and things like that. It's a great part. It's not really considered iridology, but we still do teach this in the training. And thank you, Colleen. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.